It's on. Okay. Well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Morton Blackwell, president of the Leadership Institute, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this, our Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. We have a nice crowd here for an outstanding man, and I'm very happy that we're going to be able to present him to you. We live in interesting times. It's always interesting when fissures develop in the left. And there is something that is in the newspaper this morning which is more than a little bit interesting. Everyone knows that the left, having lost the potential for a Soviet empire, is looking around for other ways to figure out how they can control our lives, and the big issue is environmentalism, which is a real juggernaut on the left and is part of their doctrine. But there's a fissure that has developed there. Yesterday, at the May Day celebrations in Havana, Cuba, they read a statement from none other than Fidel Castro, which has got to give the folks on the left in this country a certain amount of heartburn. The Washington Times story says that in his prepared statement, Castro reiterated his opposition to U.S. plans to use food crops to produce ethanol for cars. And he predicted that American fuel needs would be provided with the labor of the world's impoverished sugarcane workers. So how is the left going to resolve this problem? It's delicious. Thus far in 2007, the Leadership Institute has trained 1,557 students in 145 different schools of the 35 types of schools that we conduct. Since 1979, my staff and I have trained a total of 55,789 students. This year we've placed 26 job seekers through our employment placement program, which is going very well. You have before you on the goldenrod sheets the current schedule for the Leadership Institute schools. I ask you to take a moment to review the upcoming schools and consider attending one of them or suggesting to a friend to undertake our programs. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Ellen Hathaway. She'll offer an invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ellen came to work for the Institute in the fall of last year as a field representative, working on campuses in Kansas and Nebraska. Currently, she works as a campus services coordinator here at the Institute. She's a 2006 graduate of East Texas Baptist University in Marshall, Texas, which is a fur piece from our speaker's home area in Texas. Ellen got her degree in political science, history, and secondary education. In college, Ellen served as student body president in her senior year. She was involved in the political debate team, served as president of the Conservative Mind Society, worked at KMHT Radio, where she assisted with conservative talk show, and she authored a conservative publication entitled The Eagle's Mouth. Ellen?
Thank you. Let's bow in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to congregate this morning. Lord, I thank you for all the principled men and women here this morning. Lord God, we recognize that you are the source of all knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. We give you the glory for all things accomplished in the name of truth that stems from your word. Lord God, I pray for this nation that we will never cease to take a stand for the freedoms that you have endowed us. Give us the strength and courage to do so. Lord God, I thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Now let's stand for the pledge. pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ellen. Now my pleasure is to introduce to you Nan Swift. She's going to give an update on general training here at the Institute. Nan has held numerous positions at the Leadership Institute. She started here as a field representative in northern New England and later interned for us at the Leadership Institute. She currently serves as programs coordinator for the Core Schools Department, where she organized specialized training for groups around the country. Prior to joining LI, Nan worked as assistant director of the Lycoming County GOP Victory Center, guiding 4 Pennsylvania counties to overwhelming victories in 2004. She also served on the Lycoming County Republican Executive Committee. She cut her political teeth researching debt exclusions and overrides as an intern with the Massachusetts Municipal Association in Boston. In 2004, Nan graduated magna cum laude from Gordon College in Wenham, Massachusetts, with degrees in political studies and English literature. Nan?
Good morning. As Morton said, my name is Nan, and as programs coordinator, I am in charge of our general training here at the Leadership Institute. To some, this might raise questions about what the Leadership Institute knows about military tactics. To others, this might raise a simple, general training? Could anything sound more bland or generic? I assure you, it is anything but. I prefer specific training in lieu of the catch-all general training, because that's really what I do. I get to answer the specific needs of outside groups that come here for training, organizing schools and speakers that fit the organization. Last month, it was staff members with Americans for Prosperity who came from branch offices all around the country to learn about public relations, fundraising, and grassroots organization, all in 2 incredibly packed days. Sometimes this is college students. A few weeks ago, Becky Turco, our intern coordinator, and I drove to Grove City College, that bastion of conservative thought near Pittsburgh, to teach students how to market themselves in D.C. so that they can get jobs down here and become the next generation of conservative leaders. At the same Grove City conference, Michael Medved was speaking and broadcasting his talk radio show, and I got to meet him. A bland job where you get to meet Michael Medved? Impossible. We regularly put together training for groups like Teen Pact, the American Association of Christian Schools, to name 2. Creating different schools for new groups all the time deserves so much more than general training. And if you need another example, I currently have the opportunity to be organizing a brand new school from scratch. The Leadership Institute's first ever documentary school. Basically, this means that I have to meet people who work in places like Hollywood, who just happen to be in charge of film festivals, or who have produced their own highly successful documentaries. So bland. So boring. Already, we train conservative college students how to start their own newspapers, how to look good and communicate well on television, how to get jobs in broadcast journalism, but now we are taking our values to the big screen. Reclaiming cinematic turf for conservatives, equipping conservatives to combat the Michael Moores and Al Gores of this world, helping young filmmakers tell their stories effectively, and to meet the people they need to help spread their message. This is not general training. This is amazing, fantastic training, which of course is an apt reflection of everything we do here, and not just my own opinion. Thank you so much for your support, and if you would like more information about our new, very exciting documentary workshop, please speak to me afterwards, and I would be more than thrilled to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Nan, and I will take to heart your comments about your title. I have long taught that one of the ways to succeed in politics and recruiting and developing folks is give them a title and get them involved, and we'll take that under consideration. And now, to introduce our featured speaker, I'm going to present to you Christopher Malagisi. He is currently a grassroots coordinator here at the Leadership Institute. Previously, Christopher was the regional political director for the Republican Party of Virginia, serving as the Northern Virginia field director for Senator George Allen's campaign. Christopher has also worked for the International Republican Institute as the Middle East and North Africa Department Program Assistant and traveled to Afghanistan to implement various democracy programs. Christopher received his Master's of Public Administration from the Maxwell School of Public Affairs at Syracuse University and his BA in Political Science from American University. Christopher?
Good morning. Thank you all for coming out today. It is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce a man who probably needs no introduction with this crowd, but I will try my best to highlight some of his extraordinary career. Tom DeLay is the former House Republican Majority Leader, the second leader in the U.S. House of Representatives. He was responsible for developing issues and policies that formed the Republican agenda. Following the historic Republican victory of 1994, DeLay was elected whip by the new GOP House majority. Widely credited with revolutionizing the office, DeLay had been called the most effective whip in the history of the House of Representatives. During the 8 years he counted votes, DeLay regularly overcame daunting odds to deliver victory after victory for House Republicans using a method he called growing the vote, a sophisticated outreach effort to establish trust and build solid relationships with Republican members. The method produced the successful passage of some landmark legislation, a little thing called the Contract with America, welfare reform, the Balanced Budget Act, and the largest tax relief measure in a generation. Mr. DeLay is a native Texan, was born in Laredo, Texas on April 8, 1947. During his childhood, the DeLay family lived in Venezuela for a number of years. DeLay's years in Venezuela were a formative political experience as his family lived through some tumultuous times, 3 revolutions, 2 of them being very violent. DeLay points to his early exposure to political violence as the source of his lifelong passion for freedom. DeLay graduated from the University of Houston in 1970 with a degree in biology, something that would set him up to be the majority leader of the House of Representatives. Shortly afterwards, DeLay opened and operated a small business in Houston. The demands of attracting customers and running his business convinced Mr. DeLay that the primary impediment to economic growth stems from the twin burdens of excessive taxation and unneeded regulation. The need to lower these burdens sparked his involvement in the political process, and he successfully won a Texas State House seat in 1978 and won a Texas congressional seat 6 years later. Since retiring from Congress last year, Mr. DeLay started his own weblog titled TomDeLay.com and recently released his memoir titled No Retreat, No Surrender, One American's Fight. There is no doubt that Tom DeLay changed the American political landscape and thus has earned him respect throughout the conservative movement. Such people as Rush Limbaugh has said of Tom DeLay, call him Tom DeLay, the exterminator or the hammer if you wish, but I call him a hero and I call him a friend. Just on a more personal note, something I wanted to add, my experience meeting Mr. DeLay, I was a House Republican page in the summer of 1998, before the times of Mark Foley. And, but it was an interesting experience there, because it was unlike no other page experience. During that summer was the infamous U.S. Capitol shootings. During that time, I was serving as a page with about 60 other Republican pages. And it was a very scary experience. A man had walked into the Capitol and had shot two Capitol Hill police officers. One of them, Detective John Gibson, was responsible for the detail for Tom DeLay in the Majority Whip's office. I had many friends who were in the hall, many friends who were affected by this, because for the first time a nation had wondered how is it that someone could just walk into the Capitol and do this? And there's a certain vulnerability that a lot of people felt. Well, during that time, there was one man, though, who came out, Tom DeLay here, came out and comforted not only the family, who were the two officers that had been shot, but the staff members that were working there and all the other members all the other people on Capitol Hill who worked, came out and said, even in a tragedy like this, we can rise above this, and we can come together and reassure the nation, reassure the people on Capitol Hill that it will be safe. And my respect and admiration grew from him at that moment, just for comforting the family and for the respect that he shared for all of those who are involved in the political process. So I introduce to you, it's my proud honor and privilege, Mr. Tom DeLay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I appreciate that, Chris. It's obvious you read my book. And I see it right there. Hold it up, will you? A little commercial there. I appreciate the introduction, and I really appreciate being here with Morton and Helen, who are my real heroes. I've known Morton for many years, and he's always been my hero. Every time you turn around and see something actually happening worthwhile for the conservative movement, you can always find Morton Blackwell right there on the ground floor or on the board or certainly at the foundation of whatever that is. I don't know where he finds all the time to be involved as much as he is, but his time management skills are obviously very good because he's involved in everything, and he is such a hero of mine. I want to quickly go through what I came here to talk to you about, and that is political conservative action. And excuse me, I want Shannon, would you come up here and start working on the internet real quick? I wanted to show you all something that I've been working on. But many of you know me and know my background. As Chris says, I was a small businessman. I'm sorry? Okay. I was a small businessman. I killed bugs for a living. It was a great experience for being a whip in the house, that's for sure. But as a small businessman, I quickly found out that the government was the cost of doing business, and I better get involved in it. Little did I know I'd get this involved in it, but the Lord was leading me in the right direction, and was always there, even when I wasn't walking with Him at the time, and He took care of me and led me into Washington, D.C. Against all odds. I can remember when I first ran for the state legislature. I came from a county, Fort Bend County, outside of Houston, Texas, and this was we're very proud of our Texas history in Fort Bend County. It's the birthplace of Texas. It's where Stephen F. Austin brought the original 300 colonists. It's where Santa Anna came through on his way to defeat by Sam Houston. We just have a wonderful history, but it has a very tough political history too. They did not elect Republicans in Fort Bend County. They shot them. They had never elected a Republican from Fort Bend County. In fact, Fort Bend County was the only county in the entire United States that had two parties within the Democrat Party. They had the Woodpeckers and the Jaybirds. After the War of Northern Aggression, boy, y'all are slow this morning. They formed to keep blacks from holding office during Reconstruction. They formed the Jaybird Party, and you had to go through the Jaybird Convention before you would put your name on the Democrat ballot, under the threat of death, actually. The Woodpeckers were black sympathizers, and the Jaybirds and the Woodpeckers had gunfights all the time. Pretty tough politics, I must say. After the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, the United States Supreme Court told the Fort Bend County Jaybirds they could no longer hold these conventions. Well, 6 years after that Supreme Court decision, a little fight against judicial activism, the Jaybirds held their last convention. And when I ran in 1978, Jaybirds were still around. And here was this crazy Republican running for office. Now, I wished I could say I was a profile in courage, but I never told anybody I was a Republican. I never put it on any of my literature at all. I just ran as Tom DeLay. But after the primary, I had to start telling people, because in Fort Bend County, they thought the election was over. And I'll never forget, I was standing out in front of Howard's Cafeteria in downtown Rosenberg, Texas. It was in the middle of the week at lunch. It was a great place to politic, because that's where all the ranchers and farmers and business people ate lunch. You could get all you could eat, home cooking for about $2.50, $3, and that's where everybody ate. So I'm standing out in front of Howard's Cafeteria 3 weeks after the primary in the middle of July. I don't know if any of you have been to Houston in July, but it's pretty hot. And I'm just, pouring down sweat. I learned very quickly, this is something for the Leadership Institute. You never approach people going in because they're hungry and they're mean. You wait till they come out in order to approach them. And this particular day, this big, huge Czech rice farmer came walking out. And I walked. I knew he was a rice farmer because he had the rice farmer's uniform on, brown khaki shirt, brown khaki pants, brown cowboy boots. I knew he was of Czech descent, a lot of Czechs in Fort Bend County, because he was wearing this telltale little small square-crowned cowboy hat that the Czechs wore. He must have been 6'6" and weighed at least 280 pounds, all muscle. And I walk up to him, I say, "Hi, I'm Tom DeLay. I'm running for state representative. I'd like to talk to you about your vote." And he kind of looks down at me and he says, "Well, wait a minute. Wasn't that election about 3 weeks ago, and Larry Wilkinson won that?" I said, No. I'm Tom DeLay. I'm the Republican in the race, and I'm running for the general election. Well, that did take him aback. He'd never seen a Republican before, much less an idiot that admitted they were a Republican in Fort Bend County. He looked me up and down and took forever to say anything, but I waited him out. And finally he said, "I'm going to tell you something, boy. It'll be a cold day in hell before a Republican wins in this county. As God is my witness, Election Day 1978 was one of the coldest days on record." And I got elected first Republican in Fort Bend County. And I've in my entire political career, I have faced those cold days in hell. When I ran for Congress, things had started to change, and my district became Republican. So I ran against 6 Republicans in the primary when I ran for Congress in 1984. It was a very bloody primary, and they said it'd be a cold day in hell before a bug killer came to Washington D.C. But I won that race and got hooked up with the young Turks of Bob Walker and Newt Gingrich and Ben Weber and all those guys that decided that they didn't like being in the minority, and they announced that they were going to be in the majority. And, of course, the pundits and newspapers in this town said it'd be a blizzard in hell before that would ever happen. Yet it did happen in 1994, and the rest is history. I tell you that story because we are facing another one of those opportunities as I look at it. It's terrible that we lost the election in 2006, and I understand that, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But I also see it as an opportunity. And I'm also spent a lot of my time trying to tell conservatives, get over it. Push it behind us. Let's stop the blaming, the finger pointing, and the backstabbing, and let's push it behind us, and let's move forward. And gather together, lick our wounds, and decide what we're going to do to push the conservative cause. After the primary last year, I had to decide whether to continue in Congress or not. I spent 5 weeks on my knees in intense prayer, reaching out to my political advisors and spiritual advisors. And at the end of that 5 weeks, I knew that I was to do 2 things. Continue pushing the conservative cause and support Israel. And so I've been working on that ever since I resigned from Congress. I knew that, and this is part of the book, that I'm no retreat, no surrender. I didn't give up. I just fought. I am fighting in a different arena. I knew that even if I got reelected, that I could not be as effective in the House anymore because I was still under indictment. I couldn't be a leader. I'd just be a rank and file member. I could probably get some things done, but I knew that I was to resign Congress and move forward and try to do whatever I could using my talents and my experience to push the conservative cause. And so I resigned. Ever since that resignation, I have been researching the opposition and the conservative cause. And I have come up with what I think fills the void in the conservative movement, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But ever since I got out of college, in fact, probably even while I was growing up, I've always looked at my opposition. I've always studied my competition. I've always felt like that you had to know what you were up against in order to design your strategy to go forward. So I've always done that, and I immediately, when I left Congress, started investigating and researching the opposition. And I was doing it mostly on my own, on my own ticket, and I was getting quite far along, and then I ran into David Horowitz. And David Horowitz, if you don't know him, is an incredible individual that is working so hard, along with some of the stuff that Morton is doing, and forcing universities to recognize that, you know, there are conservatives in this world, and they deserve some sort of understanding in the university climate. And if you don't know David Horowitz, he was raised by parents that were communists, and so he probably understands the left better than anybody in America, and has written extensively about that. So I went, I just happened to go, he just happened to call me and invited me to his restoration weekend, and I ended up going, and while we were there, he showed me his website, where he has spent over $1 million in research on a website called discoverthenetwork.org. It is a definitive work of describing the left. And you don't have to go anywhere else, read anything else. You might want to read his book, Shadow Party, but go to this website if you want to understand who the left is, individuals, groups, communication organizations, all kinds of organizations, and you can get definitive research on who the left is and what they are up to. And I just wanted to show you. Have you gotten there yet? Huh? Okay. I just wanted to give you an example of what I am talking about by pulling it up on the screens. I guess these televisions have this screen up on us. Okay. And I want a disclaimer here, because I know that Morton doesn't believe in conspiracies. I'm not talking about a conspiracy. I'm talking about coalition building and smart politics. What I'm talking about is the left, over the last 4 to 5, 6 years, has put together the most impressive political organization and coalition that I have ever witnessed in my career. It is unbelievable what they have been able to do. And it basically has been put together by what I call the Clintonistas. The people, the John Podestas, the Harold Ickeys, the Morton Halperins, the Jim Jordans, the Sidney Blumenthals, the Bagalas, the Carvilles. They didn't just leave the White House in 2001. They started building and putting together coalitions around projects, around money, and otherwise, in 3 different areas. One in organization, one in coordinated funding, and one in communications efforts. I mean, they really did what I was doing, but they have mastered it and used it in the last election. What they did was they looked at the left and looked at the organizations in the left and came up with ideas to fill voids as they perceived them. For instance, they created a group called America Votes because they needed a grassroots organization. This is a group that has over 20,000 activists on the ground out in America doing different kinds of projects to push the cause for the left. They needed a think tank, so they created Center for American Progress, which is one of the most powerful liberal think tanks in Washington today. They needed a group of paid activists and a campaign organization, so they put together America Coming Together, which is a group that has over 1,400 full-time employees that are canvassers that are out there micro-targeting and gathering political information, going door to door and in targeted districts, in targeted states, and in targeted campaigns. They needed an opposition research group, so they created a group called CREW, Center for Responsible for a Responsible and Ethical Washington. This is the group that provided the opposition research that fed the Democrat Party that came after me for 11 straight years of constant attacks, frivolous attacks on the ethics and criminals, and it's also where they got a lot of their strategy that ended up in me being indicted. They needed a group that pulled Hollywood and rock bands and musical bands, so they together in order to raise money. It's called Vote for Change. This is a group that puts on concerts that raises money that's fed back into America Coming Together. It is, and I could go on and on and on, but you can see, well, it's not coming up, I guess. You can see where they work together and they coordinate together like unlike anything I've ever seen. In fact, the Clintonistas came together and formed a consulting group called Thunder Road Group, which is a consulting group that looks at the big pictures and puts together different coalitions and helps coordinate the funding for these groups. And they're very smart about it, because if they pull together a coalition for a certain project line, then they get the funders to give those different groups certain amounts of money in order to perform their projects. Give you an example. There's a coalition called Win Without War. It's formed. It's over 40 leftist organizations that have come together and signed up to fight the war, fight against the war on terror, and fight George W. Bush and his trying to carry out the war. It's run by a leftist by the name, a former congressman by the name of Tom Andrew from Maine. I had to debate him on Meet the Press a few weeks ago, and it is an impressive group. And it's very important to know what 40 organizations are members of Win Without War. It's groups like abortionists, NARAL, women's groups, NOW, NAACP. What's that got to do with war? Unions, the Sierra Club, and other environmental extremist groups, all coming together to fight on war. Now, and I'll talk about the conservative movement. The whole time, the 22 years that I was in Congress, I worked to try to get conservatives to work together on specific projects. But I got to tell you, when we did the energy bill in 2005, a long-term energy bill, I couldn't get the American Mining Association to work with the American Chemical Association, much less getting National Right to Life to work on an energy bill. Bringing the conservative coalition together is incredibly difficult for two reasons. One, we're individuals and individualists. The left are collectivists. It's easy to call them together because they're socialists to begin with. It's hard to give a talking points to the conservative movement, because if I handed out talking points here today, every one of you would find a better way to say it than what I said it. But if you give the left talking points, they read it and regurgitate it as if they are a tape recorder. But you can see, I'm trying to paint this picture of the left coming together and working on different projects and in many different ways. The funding is also coordinated. It started with MoveOn.org and raising millions upon millions of dollars and then distributing those dollars to different leftist organizations. But it also pulled in, and MoveOn.org was formed by none other than George Soros, who started a foundation called Open Society Foundation. Its assets are well over $140 million now. It's also a group that collects money unreported and also collects money from other foundations. And they reached out to foundations, and all these leftist foundations that we abhor are pumping money into Open Society and many other different organizations now, and in a coordinated way. The Tides Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, all these foundations are pumping millions upon millions of dollars into the left and their coalition. And then you also have the unions, who are also now joined up to have their funds coordinated. In fact, there was an article not too long ago on the Service Employees Union that is bragging about putting $73 million into the last election. Now, knowing them, it's probably more like 100 to 150 million because they don't do everything legal. They're only admitting and bragging about the stuff that they legally did. But $73 million from one union. And there's multiple unions out there that are funding and putting their money in and having it coordinated and spread around to the different leftist organizations. They are incredibly well funded. They are incredibly well coordinated. And for the first time in my career, the communications is also being coordinated. Unlike anything that I have ever seen before, they needed an advertising agency to provide the support for all these 527s and everything else they were doing out there. So they created Media Fund, run by, I think, by Harold Ickes. Media Fund is their advertising agency. They created a group that's a rapid response group called Media Matters that looks at media, whatever the conservatives say, and immediately responds to it. I was on a radio program in Denver, Colorado, and did this radio program. The very next day, Media Matters Colorado comes out with a blog that took my transcript and showed where I had lied all throughout the interview that I had the day before. That is an incredibly powerful. And they put it on their blog, and then they take that, and then they spread it out to 400 to 500 media outlets. And, of course, the left is waiting there in the media to take that and put it as if it's truth, and it just starts cycling throughout. And I could get even more involved in that if you want to talk about it. Air America, they needed a way to answer the conservative radio talk show out there, so they created Air America. It's failing, thank God, but they created it, and it's pretty impressive. But they did it so that they could coordinate the communications in this country. So this is an incredibly powerful coalition. Against what? Now, I'm not criticizing any organization in the conservative movement. I'm just telling you my perception of the conservative movement. We have no grassroots organization under my definition. That means chapters of activists actually on the ground in congressional districts created to reach out and create a close working personal relationship with that member of Congress, either for him or against him. We have nothing like that. We are a bunch of mail houses, many of them created by Richard Viguerie, and I'm not criticizing them, but organizations that are mail houses with letterheads or email lists. And the best that we can do is to blast an email list and get people to write their congressman. Now, that's important, but it is not politically powerful, and it certainly can't stand up to this coalition because, and I think I heard Morton say this in the last week or so, the top-down stuff that we are so used to has got to stop. We have to reach out in America and recruit activists to come from the bottom up. That's the new day of politics in America, is reaching out and organizing and activating people that want to fight for the conservative cause in the real world out there. We have no communications coordination whatsoever. We have nobody doing real opposition research. We have, and so what I'm trying to do now is to fill those voids as I perceive them. I've created a grassroots organization called Coalition for Conservative Majority. We have some brochures here if you're interested in it. It's a real grassroots organization as I described. I created a group called Freedom Institute for Research and Education, which I call an action tank. We have no action tank. We've got a lot of think tanks, and they're very useful and very important. We've got a lot of people putting out paper. We've got a lot of researching going on, but there's nobody pulling that together, all that's out there, and developing a specific legislative agenda, working with conservatives inside the House and inside the Senate to push the conservative cause in the legislative manner. And the Freedom Institute for Research and Education is also an opposition research group that is looking at the left, what they're doing, who they are, and putting that out in a public way. We also are creating a group for communication strategy. There is no conservative national communication strategy. What I mean by that is pulling together all that's out there and developing a political strategy for communications. We were talking about doing documentaries. We need more documentaries out there with our worldview. We need more movies out there with our worldview. But we also need a political organization to get it distributed and pull people together so that America gets to see the documentary. We've got some good documentaries out there, but nobody gets to see them. We need a coordination of pulling together conservative radio talk show hosts. They don't even meet. That's incredible. They have a big overarching organization, but it's got the left in there too. I'm talking about conservative radio talk show hosts coming together and politically strategizing as to what's important in getting their message and the information that's necessary for them. We need a political strategy for competing in the blogosphere, in cyberspace, on YouTube, on MySpace, and all of that. So we're putting together an organization to do that. We're also got a 527, but we're trying to do redistricting. Because of McCain-Feingold, the parties really can't do redistricting. The Democrats have been doing redistricting now for over 3 years, and they've raised already over $20 million to do their redistricting, and we haven't even had our first meeting as Republicans, and redistricting's coming, folks. And in fact, we lost several state legislative bodies in the last election, and we lost a net loss of Republican governors, which is going to have a huge impact on redistricting. How do you think the conservatives could ever wish to regain the House if we're not involved in redistricting? If they are controlling the drawing of the lines, you'll never get the House back. So we're putting together an organization to be involved in redistricting in the front. Ladies and gentlemen, if I have a message for you today, it is that we have got to come together as a cause. We have to change our mindset and get up every morning and think, how can we best strategize in order to push the conservative cause? How can I help the cause using whatever organization I'm involved in to push that organization into developing coalitions around specific around a project? Morton is involved in a group called Third. We're coming together starting Friday. Third Force meeting. It's the first time that I know of, and I asked Morton, he couldn't think of it either. It's a meeting of the leadership of conservative organizations starting Friday and Saturday. It's the first time that conservative organizations have come together for action-oriented items and try to put together action-oriented coalitions, which is very encouraging. And I can't wait to see what comes out of that meeting. But we have got to come together. We have got to put the past behind us, come together, and move forward if we're going to see the kind of America that we all want and dream of. So I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. We have about 10 or 15 minutes left, and you can ask me anything, even if it's something that I haven't talked about today. We have to come together as a movement and join in different project lines. In my book, I lay out a suggested agenda. I'm not saying you ought to jump on this agenda, but it's a suggested agenda. And it's national security, win the war on terror, which includes homeland security and border security. It's get rid and scrap the tax code. I'm a fair taxer, but get rid of the federal tax code and design a tax code for the 21st century. Redefine government based upon constitutional principles, hold the judiciary accountable, and fight the war and win the war against our culture. That is an agenda that I think conservatives can rally around. Under that agenda, you can pick certain projects that we all join in on. It may be that the National Right to Life is working on a tax policy today, but the tax groups will be working on life issues tomorrow. We have got to think differently than we are right now, because we are so fractured and so out there and really not working together. I know we come together at CPAC, we come together, but in my opinion, we come together and we talk a lot. And when you leave CPAC, there's no action item. There's nothing for you to join. There's nothing for you to do. And that was I thought the original reason that the American Conservative Union was formed, was to pull the conservatives together to work for each other. So we have got to get into this mindset that we're going to work with each other, even on things that you may not be organized around, or things that you're not being paid for. Yeah. If I understand the coalition, I'm not sure what you mean by leftist. Are you saying conservative organizations have signed on with the left? Oh, well, yeah. They need cheap labor. Well, first of all, I'm not suggesting that everybody in the conservative movement is going to come and work on a particular project. You don't need everybody to come together and work on a specific project. But you have to have the strategy to reach out for those projects and pull in as many as you can that is interested in that project. In the case of illegal aliens and illegal immigration, you're not going to get the pro-business groups involved, because they want cheap labor, and they want to keep the illegal labor that they are now employing, and they don't like employer sanctions. So you're not going to get them, but you can pull together others, and there have been attempts to pull conservative organizations together. but it is so narrowly focused in what organizations are actually working together against illegal immigration. We got to reach further than that. You can't tell me that there aren't conservative organizations that are tax organizations that don't believe in strong border security and that couldn't join an organization, particularly if you coordinated the giving and it wouldn't cost them anything out of their normal budget to participate in that project. If you join our coalition, you'll get X amount of dollars in order to carry out the project that you have agreed to carry out. That's how that would work, and certainly all of us being individualists and entrepreneurs would be interested in going and picking up that kind of money. Yeah, Mike. It is totally, is the center of gravity of this coalition closer to Obama or Hillary? Hillary is very much involved, in fact, sits on the boards of some of these organizations. I'm not talking about all of the left, but the ones created by the Clintonistas are all available to Hillary. And they've already tested their muscle. This group and this way of doing things was used in the 2006 election, and I think, coupled with the frustration against Republicans by its base, and we could get into that, the disaster of the Republican Party in 2006, coupled with this coalition, is why we lost the election in 2006. How do you think the Democrats won with no agenda, no vision? They hid their leadership a whole month before the election. They won because they had this group. You can take any one of our incumbents in the House of Representatives that lost, and you would find this shadow party working against them for 18 to 24 months. They're already working on the election of 2008 in specific targeted Republican congressional districts right now as we speak. We're doing nothing. And that is all available to Hillary Clinton. That's why I have said publicly, and I mean it, if we don't come together and if we don't unite in some way and start working together, Hillary Clinton will be the next president of the United States, and the Republicans will be in the minority for a very long time. In trying to tell you what the question is, the question basically is, in my book, I talk about redefining government based upon constitutional principles, and one of those is to go back prior to 1913 and have senators elected by their state legislatures. And I make a case in the book. In fact, in the book is a whole manifesto of what I believe in, trying to urge the conservatives to come back to our core principles and stand on those principles. What do I see in the future if you start electing senators by state legislatures? It is, without getting into that, and I'm not sure we have time to get into it in specific, I also call for expanding the number of seats in the House of Representatives. With the population growth, the districts are getting too big, and so big that they are now outliving the intention of our founding fathers, and that is to have elected members of the House that closely represent the political will of the people at any particular moment. That's what the House of Representatives is all about. The Senate is supposed to be, as we all have heard before, the cooling saucer to cool off the hot politics that come from the House. Well, they're politicians. They just have 6-year terms now. They are nothing but politicians now. And all decisions that they make are based upon the political, the same kinds of ways that members of the House make their decisions. They have little or no regard for states or states' rights or what is important to the states because they're not tied to the states. Our founding fathers were brilliant in understanding human weakness. If you are elected by the state legislature, you're going to pay attention to what's going on in that state. And you're going to, and therefore you don't have to be running statewide in an elective process, and therefore you can be even more of a deliberative body, and you can watch what's going on. I am not one of those that want to see things happen quickly. Now, I would have loved to see things happen quickly with a Republican majority, but right now I don't want to see anything happen quickly with the Democrat majority. And thank God our system moves slowly so that you don't have these quick turnarounds in our governments and what comes out of those governments. So, yes, I think Morton's getting tired and he's about to cut me off. Amen. Well, it's sort of a dilemma that we're in. I love that they're losing seats out of the Northeast, and they're coming to the South because 9 times out of 10 that seat's going to at least be competitive for a conservative to win. But you're absolutely right. First of all, we shouldn't be even counting illegal immigrants in the population numbers that determine what districts are created and how districts move around. And we could get into the illegal immigration issue. I designed a strategy I thought would work. The House passed in 2005 a very strong border security bill, said we're not going to go this amnesty route, period, and we want to stand strong against McCain and Kennedy in the Senate. And the whole idea was when the Senate passed their bad bill and the House got together, the House would stand strong on border security, telling them we're not going to do legalization or any of that kind of stuff. We will talk to you, and the compromise would come on a very highly restricted guest worker program. And then you get a bill with strong border security and some highly restricted guest worker program. That didn't work out because the Senate couldn't pass a bill, but and now we're going to get a really bad piece of legislation. So you're right. But the point I'm trying to make is fundamental, and it's fundamental to the Constitution. I don't think our founding fathers ever envisioned a congressional district to have 700,000 people in it. It makes it you are as the population goes up, your representative is more and more removed from his constituency, and you want just the opposite. You want to be able to get a hold of him. You want to be able to grab his lapels and shake him and throw him up against the wall if he's doing the wrong thing. Yes. Well, you probably know I'm not a term limits guy. I think that term limits takes institutional knowledge and transfers it to the elected official to the staff. And I could go on and on about term limits. And that has been very evident where term limits have been imposed in state legislatures around the country. The best term limit to me is the election. Why take away the people's right to have whoever they want by some mandate by the government? I think it's just so contrary to the conservative cause. I've never been for term limits. And So I respectfully, if you are for them, I respectfully disagree. Yes. I was a champion of it, actually. And you know how I did it? And so far I have won in Houston, Texas. I did it by contrasting highways to mass transit. Mass transit, and now with the Democrats in charge, the left is going to put more highway money into mass transit, which is useless, by the way, as a transportation project, unless you're living on top of each other like they do in Washington, New York. Well, let me finish my comment. And if you pit highway and expansion of freeways against the monies being used and wasted on mass transit, then you start winning. And in Houston wanted to spend all of its like Atlanta wanted to spend all its transportation money on mass transit. We had a big political fight over it. We killed the rail system in Houston, and we are now in the process of expanding our freeways. That's how you do it. Sir, that's it. How do you restore statesman? I think I just gave a whole speech about that. That's what I'm talking about. Is in holding. What the question is: how do you restore statesmanship in our elected officials that are on the Hill? Accountability, accountability, accountability. And the point is that if you have grassroots organizations, true grassroots organizations of constituents, meeting on a regular basis, trying to create a close personal working relationship with that member of Congress, as I said earlier, either for him or against him. That is accountability. You cannot, in my opinion, have accountability from Washington, D.C. Accountability comes from activists that are dedicated to hold their member of Congress accountable, not just at election time, but working on projects that hold them accountable on legislative action and where their votes are being taken. And when they take a vote, hold them accountable by showing up to their next town meeting saying, why did you vote that way? And that is how you develop statesmen, and is to hold them accountable. All right, I'm out of time, I am told. Thank you very much. God bless each and every one of you.
Wait, let me close it out here. I want to make a little presentation. Tom, we thank you for all that you have done for our country and all that it seems you are going to be doing for our country. And as a token of our appreciation, I'm presenting you with one of the Leadership Institute's very nice Adam Smith ties.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast next month will feature the former Attorney General of the United States, the Honorable Edwin Meese III, who's now the Ronald Reagan Distinguished Fellow in Public Policy at the Heritage Foundation and Chairman of the Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. I know that many of you are going to want to come. Ed Meese is one of the great heroes of the conservative movement, and a man who, despite the exalted positions he has had, is still fully engaged in the public policy process. Those of you who would like a tour of the Leadership Institute should come up here to the lectern on this side. Lindsay Mustard, where are you, Lindsay? Step on up here. Your guide will be the lovely and talented Lindsay Mustard, who will give you a tour, stem to stern, of the Leadership Institute facilities. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.